they found that project-based learning actually increases their test scores, right? And students feel like when they engage in project-based learning, it's actually more rigorous, right? It's more demanding, right, when it comes to skills, because they're practicing these skills that they're not being tested on the aspect, right? Presentation, collaboration, creativity. And so they actually did an experiment, and they, 1 year, because again, of the pressure to increase test scores, they abandoned project-based learning. And what they found was that the test scores actually dropped. And so what happens, they recommitted to project-based learning, and now that's their mode of operation. That's like their instruction, right?
Yeah.
That's the core of their instruction. Yes, they still have their day-to-day, right? Traditional instructions, but I think what they really do is they're really thoughtful about planning out the projects per grade level and how to involve the teachers. And so what you guys submitted was really how to get teachers on board. So if you want to look at your program practice here, this is your what you submitted, right? So I'm just gonna link this to you guys here, so you guys just have a reference of that.
Was that in
Um,
our application?
yeah, it's in your application. So
Yeah. Sorry, I haven't.
I know
It's
it's
been a
been a
while.
while. You guys, and thank you for your patience. You guys were the first one to submit this, so I'm just so excited to have you guys on board. And also as a middle school, there's no middle school, a part of the cohort. So there's a lot to learn and also a lot to offer, from your
I
perspective.
would like to. One kind of idea that I had was kind of like what me and Dr. Morales had spoken about was working together on that cross curricular project with history and the electives, and all that being a highly recommended artifact that the kids will put in portfolio and defense. But like
Mm,
for our purposes right here, me and Dr. Morales will work on that project. And that will kind of be like for portfolio and defense, we know that there's gonna be one project that is really high leverage that the
mm.
kids could use because that's what will be like, right? That's the way that I see. I don't know, Dr. Morales, if you have any input on that.
So you're talking about kind of going at it in stages, like you and I would develop our project, and then that project event that goes into the portfolio. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that.
I think that's doable.
And then Raphael, for your purposes, like Mr. Tang said, you can look at data. You might want to do like I don't know, like what's your control, like in terms of like seeing an effect? Like, is
So,
it just grades? Is it like perceived interest by the kids? Like you might want to give like a survey, maybe a pre-survey to all the students to kind of gauge their level of interest in the assignment.
so
And
we're
then
gonna do like putting a inquiry at the center of the table, which one of our norms. Like, yeah, so I'm gonna check grades and like surveys. That's a great idea that I'm gonna implement, that I'm gonna go ahead and implement. Also, I already kind of have a targeted group that me and Dr. Morales talked about. Like she has in her. Hello and welcome again. Thank you so much for volunteering to participate in this great event where our students are going to get to showcase a cross curricular project that we've been working on. Here at Hollenbeck Middle School, we really want to get ahead of the game when it comes to culturally relevant education and addressing social justice issues. And we feel that this project really did that by taking into consideration multiple contents and provide making sure that the students concentrated on 21st century skills. I'm very proud to say that one of our presenters, I'm not going to mention who, I don't want any biases towards our evaluators, our panelists, won fourth place statewide in the category of middle school. So we're very proud to have one of our presenters actually win prize money and most importantly, be recognized by the state of California and this mapping competition. So this is part of a mapping competition that our students entered. At Hollenbeck Middle School, we have a great tradition of entering competitions because we want to show that our students with putting high expectations for them, we could compete with anybody anywhere. And we were the mock trial champions a couple years ago, competing in LA County against the most affluent schools in the county, not just the district. We were LAUSD East Math Field Day champions for 4 years, many years ago. And we've even had students go all the way to nationals in the science fair competitions and go to statewide competitions for History Day. So we're very proud of that. So let's get started with what our project is all about. Mapping for Change is our PBL. It's an 8th grade project for STEM medical math pathway projects. So warm-up questions, important things to consider. What are the themes or ideas of our project that we're going to emphasize? We're going to emphasize in cultural relevant PBLs, in social studies, science, and pathway courses. And so what are the major standards that this project is covering? Well, one, what are the cause and effects and correlation of events and policies in the short term and long term? So this is related to U.S. history, where students have to analyze policies and how that shaped our country. And we want to know how our country is being shaped by policies of today. Number two, how can we more precisely define constraints of designs to take into account relevant scientific principles that can potentially impact people and the environment? How can this affect policies our city leaders implement? So we want to take a next generation standard and seeing how designs of our civic engineers, how that affects the way that our city runs. How does that affect this discrepancies in different areas? So the topics, science engineering, what the topic for that, the science teacher, she was our main person, our main focus. She worked on the GIS mapping and design solutions and constraints. That's where the students got to compete in a statewide competition by doing this project. Our social science teacher concentrated on geography and the growth of the United States and how maps contribute to the U.S. expansion. So how does the evolution of the United States look through the lens of maps? Or how do we use maps as tools and guides? And our pathway courses, we concentrated in the cause and effect of inequities in our society. And how could we have possible solutions for those inequities? Our final project is our My California competition. What skills or knowledge do we want our students to demonstrate? What final product can each contact area deliver? And the final product was My California GIS mapping showcase and competition. So skills learning that the students learn in our projects in science, they use maps to analyze civic engineering constraints and design solutions by learning how to use the GIS software. In social science, they use maps to analyze the impact of geographical, economical, and civics in the development of the United States by using primary documents such as photos and up-to-date maps. And in the pathway courses, we use maps to address social justice by pointing out inequities and the causes of the inequities by using critical thinking and problem-solving skills. The final product for science was My California GIS mapping story map. For social science was the primary sources for My California GIS mapping story map and societal impact. And a pathway course will be the presentation itself. Okay, thank you very much. So now we're going to go to the rubric. This is part of another presentation. So the rubric, we're going to judge you're going to evaluate the students on 3 different things. The first one is, are they being an effective communicator? Their oral presentation skills. So we're going to start off at the highest level. They have a clear voice, a clear tone. They have eye contact and body language based on the appropriate audience. Then you will be giving them a 4. If they do that sometime, most of the time, you give them a 3. If they do that sometimes, you give them a 2. If they don't do it at all, give them a 1. Remember, these are 8th graders. So if you're not used to working with young students, just take that into consideration as part of the context. The second area you'll be evaluating the students in is critical thinking in cultural relevant issues. So, did they gather relevant data from their maps, analyze it, and interpret the data in context to make inferences to apply to real world situations taking place in their community? So, are they being really critical thinkers of issues that matter to them? And that they'll get a 4. A 3, they gather the maps, but not clearly. A 2, if they only have limited data, and a 1 if they have no data. Finally, the social justice problem solvers. Students will get a 4 if they clearly analyze evidence to determine the deep impact of inequities in our city through GIS maps and offer possible solutions and ways to implement those solutions. So you believe they clearly have a problem-solving lens, and remember, these are 8th graders, so they still have a lot to learn about politics, about constraints based on regulations, and so on. But with an 8th grade lens, were they clearly able to analyze the evidence and provide a solution? Remember, one of our kids did come to 4th place, just to give you a little context of their possible responses. And if they analyze the evidence but not clearly, they'll get a 3. If they somewhat analyze the evidence, they'll get a 2. And if they didn't analyze it at all, they will get a 1. Most importantly to me, as a social justice educator, is really the feedback that you give the students. Like, demonstrating that you communicate, that you validate their assets. And you give them some feedback so they could reflect and improve themselves as well. I thank you so much for joining our team and volunteering to help us really foster the linking of the learning of our students to prepare them to be 21st century college and career ready. And most of all, to become problem solvers of the things that we have to solve as a community of learners, as a community overall. Hi, this is Mr. Cruz, and I'm just making a video to demonstrate how we're gonna present our GIS mapping presentations that incorporate our skills for the 21st century learning, that incorporate historical standards that are based around primary documentation and how societies in the United States, how we use maps to illustrate the path of different groups in the United States as the United States expanded between the 20th century and the 21st century. And also taking a science lens and looking at how different designs, whether it be civic, engineering, and mechanical, could affect our environment and the people and populations that live in it, with a special consideration to biomes, so group of communities. And finally, in our pathway courses, we're going to talk about civic engineering, and most importantly, in respect to social justice. What are the inequities that we find with these mapping skills, and what are possible resolutions that we find? We're going to have focus on our pathway outcomes of being a critical thinker, problem solver, communicator, and collaborator. To get a 4 in this presentation, a student must have a presentation with a clear voice, clear tone, proper tone, eye contact, and body language based on the appropriate audience. A 3 is most of the time they do this. A 2 is sometimes. A 1, there isn't a clear voice. Being a critical thinking and being critical thinkers in culturally relevant issues. So to get a 4, they got to gather relevant data from their maps, analyze it, and interpret the data in context to make inference to apply to a real world situation taking place in their community. This is definitely derived from the scientific lens and the social science, social studies lens, the California state standards and next generation standards. So the students should be able to look at the data and interpret it and apply it to real world context and make a cultural relevant connection as how it affects their communities. Finally, students should be social justice problem solvers. To get a 4, they clearly analyze evidence to determine the deep impact of inequalities in our city through GIS maps and offer possible solutions and ways to implement those solutions. So right here, the students, with the knowledge that they have at the moment, civics, of the creation of the United States and their ideals of scientific and engineering practices, and their pathway courses towards careers in science, technology, education, math, or medical purposes. Students are going to give the solution from their inference, from their critical thinking, to become effective problem solvers. They analyze some evidence, but not clearly, they'll get a 3. Somewhat analyze it, they'll get a 2. And if they didn't analyze it at all, they'll get a 1. This is an example presentation, model presentation for the students. The Train Tracks of Pasadena by Mr. Cruz. The purpose of my project was to disprove the myth that everyone in Pasadena is well off and that the city is segregated by its cultural train tracks. The 210 freeway. Ironically enough, the 210 freeway is connected to what is called the Suicide Bridge, a historical landmark in Pasadena with an infamous story. In our first map, you could see the map of Pasadena and home values. As you can see in the west part of Pasadena, that's the Rose Bowl for people familiar with that, the home values are very high. And you see in this map, above the 210 and below the 210, the values of home are still high, which is going to be something to consider. Is having a high value home always a good thing? Of course, it depends on ownership and other items such as inflation and prices of goods. In the second map, we look at the household incomes and we see some key differentials in the different areas. If you look at the west side, once again, you could see that the high home values equate with a high income level. If you look at the south of the 210 freeway, where it says Pasadena, that's the 210 freeway. Below it, you see mostly high income to average income. And that also kind of correlates to the home values that were high in that area. But we see a discrepancy above the 210, where you see most of the income is below average. but the home prices are still high. So that is a very interesting thing to analyze later on. In my third map, we're looking at unemployment rates. And there is very low unemployment in West Pasadena, even though there is a chunk right here that you could see that maybe because of COVID, there's a increase of unemployment, but for the most part, it's very low. Similarly, below the 210 is very low. And now we can make a correlation with the income level and unemployment. As you see in the area above the 210, there is more unemployment. The unemployment rate is higher, which is a key factor to think about. Maybe we want to think about the education levels of the residents in different areas. Now we're looking at a map that has to do with the education area, with the education of the residents in each area. As you see in West Pasadena, once again, there's a correlation between education, income, and home values, and low unemployment. Similarly, below the 210, you see highly educated to most educated individuals, and makes a correlation to the good income that they're earning and good home values. If you look above the 210 freeway, you'll see further discrepancy as you see further discrepancy with the home values. As the income is low, the education is lower, and the unemployment is higher. Finally, in my last map, you could see the correlation based on race and based on the segregation of Pasadena. West Pasadena, which had high home values, high income, high education rates, is predominantly white. Below the 210 is also mostly white, as the high income, high value homes and low unemployment is evident in those areas, as we saw in the previous maps. Finally, we see that in the area where there was decent value of homes, yet yet high unemployment, low education, and low income, it's mostly African Americans and Latinos, Latinx individuals that live.
Hello, Hollenbeck family. I'm Tanya Ortiz Franklin, your newest school board member for LA Unified, and I'm so excited for tonight's conversation and presentations. I'm bummed I couldn't be with you, but I did want to share with you the importance of your project-based learning and how it applies in the real world. I was a student in LA Unified and I worked with teachers recently at Hollenbeck. And now as a policymaker, I can't tell you enough the importance of making decisions based on what we know about our community. I generally just love maps. I think they're fun, but I want to show you a couple that I've used recently to really think about meeting the needs of our diverse communities across LA Unified. So let me share with you a couple that we've been looking at the school board. The first is about closing the digital divide. So something I've noticed over the last several years is some neighborhoods in our district have better access and choices to broadband than others. What you're looking at now is a heat map that our instructional technology division put together based on our current students' connections to internet during the pandemic, during distance learning. And I actually wrote a resolution with a couple of colleagues a few months ago asking to look at this data and to solve the problems. So the heat map shows you where there are warmer colors, it's slower speeds, like in the yellow areas, here is closer to downtown, here is closer to Boyle Heights. And in the greener areas, the cooler areas, it's faster. Let me show you another version. This is by community of school. So again, this is close to downtown, this is close to East LA. I represent the district all the way down to San Pedro. And we can see that there are some neighborhoods that have slower internet speeds. And that's really where we should be spending our dollars and resources to connect students and families to affordable broadband. That's one way mapping has helped me as a school board member. Here's another one. We've all been experiencing the effects of COVID. This shows us how by neighborhood, again, across LA Unified, that has shown up differently. So it's a little confusing, I know, with all these numbers here. I represent District 7. Monica Garcia represents District 2, which is where Hollenbeck is. And you can see in the red areas is where we have some really high need, both around the Student Equity Needs Index, which was a policy passed a couple of years ago and just rejuvenated a couple of weeks ago, and with COVID impacts, people who are suffering the effects of this massive pandemic. And so again, we think about how do we give dollars to schools to help our students and families recover from the academic and social emotional impacts of this COVID-19. And just one more view to see the two maps together. This is District 7 pretty much. And on both of them, you can see in the northern part of my district, there are more need than in the southern part of my district. That was a lot really quickly. I'll share these with you if you want to dig in more deeply, but I just wanted to share with you, Hollenbeck scholars and families, that your learning, your work is really important for long-term change. So congratulations on mapping for change. I look forward to seeing your projects at some point. And thank you for taking a look at how we look at maps in LA Unified to make decisions with our communities. Thanks, Kai.
Okay, well, we have time for one more question.
I'll jump in here. Ashley, thank you for your presentation. I thought you did a really thorough job of explaining the situation with homelessness. And it really gave me a good picture of what the crisis is. My question for you is, did you notice or were you surprised by any of the data that came up when you were looking at the maps? You know, what were some of your thoughts before you were looking at the maps about homelessness and then after, once you started to look at those maps?
Well, something that really surprised me was the amount of shelters that we have in Los Angeles and like the services that we have. I actually think I mentioned it to my science teacher, Miss Ruiz. I was just surprised by how little resources we had here. And like, I actually didn't think there were that few. Like, I knew there were a few of them, but I didn't think it was gonna be that little amount. So yeah. Now after that, after researching that, I actually realized that we actually do need to do something about this. So yeah, it kind of inspired me to be more, it inspired me to be more confident about this project.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ashley. Appreciate your presentation. And next I'm gonna showcase, John, do you want to do a live presentation or you want me to show your video?
Can you show my video?
Okay.
Certain areas have a higher risk of a person catching COVID there. But have you ever thought if areas that have more poverty or homelessness can also have more cases? I decided to put this presentation together because COVID has spread throughout LA County population and has claimed the lives of more than 24,000 people. This pandemic has put the entire world on pause, and we can all agree that some people have had good or bad experiences. Although it is always important that we have teamwork because not everyone has been getting equal treatment, and more specifically in our vaccine distribution. COVID has affected many different cities, and it's interesting to see the riskiest areas due to COVID. As you can see, the most affected areas seem to be the areas around the cities of Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, and Huntington Park. These areas were the most affected areas, but are now showing good progress as LA County is now easing restrictions. In non-wealthier areas of Hollywood, and fewer cases compared to other areas such as Boyle Heights. October 2, Boyle Heights had 4,003 cases, and Hollywood had 1,268, which is nearly 3 times less than Boyle Heights. And the main reason why this is happening is because in lower income areas, more homes are usually more closer to each other. And COVID-19's main form of transmission is through contact with other people. Another inequity is in the vaccine distribution. Vaccines have been proven to be safe and effective, but if not everyone has been getting equal distribution. Some people have been getting more vaccines in certain areas, and other cities have been getting less. A possible solution to this pandemic could be to make it easier to vaccinate people. Maybe we could also have people going door by door asking people if they want to get vaccinated. Also, we need to end false theories about COVID-19 vaccines. Only 52.6% of people in LA County have received at least one dose. And we need to focus on these groups of people because in order to reach herd immunity, we need to be at least 80%. I hope that my audience learns about high-risk areas, or at least the most affected areas. It's important to know which areas have been most infected. In one of these maps, you can see that wealthier areas had fewer cases compared to other areas like Boyle Heights. Some possible reasons why LA has had more cases than other areas is because LA has lots of poverty and homelessness, and there are lots of homes next to each other. And lastly, vaccines are out for everyone 12 and older. And it is important that everyone can get the vaccine because they have shown their effectiveness. LA County is now in a decline in cases, positivity rate, and death.
Okay, so now John's gonna answer some questions.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for your presentation. This is Mr. CEO. I just wanted to ask, what made you want to pick this topic, and what was it about this topic that, what stood out to you from this topic that you want to kind of share with us?
I chose this topic because this topic, COVID, has affected our community. Boyle Heights has really quickly spread throughout the entire area, and not only Boyle Heights, but the entire community. And I remember I used to see how COVID kept on affecting not just us here in Boyle Heights, but also the entire world, and how it was spreading really quickly, and how doctors and nurses were really short-handed when it came to handling COVID when it was at its highest peak.
All right, any other questions for John?
John, thank you for that great presentation. Did anything surprise you about what you learned about about COVID and the areas it affected most in Los Angeles?
I was actually surprised to see that Boyle Heights in my map, I showed that it only had one vaccination site, and that was it. That was only one. Meanwhile, as I saw into other areas, there was much more vaccination sites, and that goes to show how not every county or area is getting equal treatment in this COVID, and we should all be trying to work together to fix this pandemic.
Thank you.
Okay, time for one last question, if there's any last questions. Okay, our next presenter wants to present live. So Adrian, if you could get your presentation ready, please put it, you could share the screen. Adrian's also got fourth place in the, maybe Miss Ruiz could talk about the competition really fast and the honor that our student Adrian received.
Oh, okay, very quickly. So every year sorry, I can't, the name is drawing a blank, but basically the GIS community in California puts together a annual competition of middle school and high school. And so each school can submit up to 5 maps. And I submitted many of the students that are presenting tonight, and we heard early, I guess, maybe because everyone's online right now, but we got word back pretty early that he placed 4th, you know, out of hundreds of submissions. That's really good. And he gets a money prize for that.
All right, awesome. So go ahead, Adrian.
Can you see my screen properly?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my ArcGIS visual maps. Sorry, maps visual aid. So I'm starting off. My name is Adrian. I was born and raised in LA, and I've been around for 14 years. So I've witnessed some things living in LA and going through the various neighborhoods that's been here. So the main reasons for writing this topic was to shed light on what's going on in our neighborhoods, and I want to help to try to break the cycle of poverty that plagues cities much like Los Angeles. In this map, you can see 5 different colors. The red zones on the map indicate that 60 to 90% of the population are below the poverty line that the US 2020 census labeled. And as you can see, the areas with generally denser populations are below the poverty line. Many of these red areas have been labeled as dangerous, quote unquote, but in reality, it's just filled with those less fortunate than others, and in reality have been losing their homes to increasing rent costs, gentrification, and other factors that are out of their control, and they just can't afford to live in areas like Los Angeles, so they have to move their homes, move away from their family because there's not enough money to pay their monthly rents and sustain living. Same as the map above, the darker areas are the areas of greater Los Angeles, in the greater Los Angeles, where 70% of their residents pay most of their salary for rents. A lot of the problems are very condensed in the same areas as the map before. And this is a huge red flag for many people when it comes to trying to help put money into building better areas in our city. They view these areas as, oh, well, people are losing their homes or they can barely afford to pay rent on time. So they're not thinking it's worth to put money into it. They're not saying, oh, this will definitely benefit us. But in reality, it's just causing more harm than it is good for the people that live there. And in this map, you can see that it matches up with the first 2 maps. The darker areas were homeless individuals that lived in those areas in Los Angeles. The darker areas are from 700 to ranging from 3,100. And that's just in one small area of Los Angeles. If you go very close to downtown, you find Skid Road, which is lined with tents and miles upon miles of homeless people who just have nowhere else to go. And you can see a homeless person just anywhere in major cities, but I feel in like Los Angeles, this is a major problem that it's been taking way too long to fix. And for my final map, it matches up with the first 3 maps. Again, the darker areas are the crime per 1K residents in Los Angeles. And in this map, it tells that there are 21 crimes per 1,000 residents in this area. And yearly, they're even greater than that. There are at least 72 violent crimes per year, 102 non-violent crimes per year, and nearly 300 petty crimes as labeled by the police per year. And many people, when thinking about Los Angeles, they're thinking about getting mugged in downtown, being jumped by a bunch of thugs in an alleyway, when in reality, it's just people who are trying to make a living because they're so desperate that they need to result in violence or crime to just sustain themselves or their family or anyone who needs to rely on them. And it's horrible to think about how people out here are cold, hot, hungry, starving, like, and it's a very somber thought. And I have ideas to solve these problems. In Los Angeles, you can't go more than 5 miles without seeing a big chain fast food restaurant. And I think closing these big chain restaurants will allow local mom and pop shops to open up, and we'll start getting more money to flow into the neighborhoods. And my second idea was to have money from the city get put towards refurbishing and building newer public areas and centers, not building a new shopping center that we get once every 10 years because it's out of date, or some other state or city got, oh, this newer one, and now our council people or whoever decides those want a newer one to match theirs. And I feel like how these ideas can help our communities is by, when we close the big name brand stores, it's not going to hurt their profits. They're big name for a reason. They have stores all over the country and in other countries and other continents. And allowing these local shops to open up will allow more money to be able to flow into the neighborhood and get people that need jobs without having to spend years and money that they don't have on master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, PhDs, and they're just able to sustain themselves. And maybe it's just minimum wage for whatever those shops can, but it's still money coming in for food on the table and rent. And then also putting money into public areas will give people a place to go to sort things out, and hopefully give them a headspace to seek help if needed. It will help them build communities, build friendships that eventually help people who fall into homelessness. If they have someone they can rely on, it'll give them a chance to get back on their feet instead of getting kicked to the curb by their landlord, because that's just how business is with rent nowadays. Thank you for your time.
All right. Any questions for Adrian?
I mean, it's not really a question. It's like all the rest of them, Adrian. I appreciate your presentation. I also appreciate the personal connection, just talking about yourself at the beginning. That was great. And the thought just to think about like gentrification and and some of the solutions that are that you mentioned as well. So just thank you for that. Where do you all get, well, Adrian, let me ask you, where do you find the maps? Where are the resources for? Where do you get the maps from? Where'd you find that from? What do you use?
Well, the contest entailed using maps from the ArcGIS. So there are many people who find data and input them into map creating resources, and they just upload them to ArcGIS, and whatever sort of presentation you're trying to, or topic you're trying to find, you find data layers related to that topic, and you sort of compile them to see what data is more reliable than others. And then my numerical data I got from primarily the US 2020 census.
Thanks.
I'll jump in, Adrian. Thank you again for your presentation. And just a few points of feedback. I think in the beginning, it was very clear your thesis and what you were intending to argue. And your use of maps and the 3 maps that you shared really helped me as the audience member see the links that you were drawing between homelessness, crime, and income. So really, it accentuated your argument. So I think you have a bright future in this work, and maybe in helping improve our communities. So let me know when you're running for president. I will be voting for you. And with that, maybe more immediately, the math, science, and technology magnet at Roosevelt has a big project that is very similar to this, and they're 11th graders who are doing this type of work with ArcGIS, and you have a great start here as an 8th grader. So just my hats off to you for a great presentation. Congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate those words greatly.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Adrian.
Hello, my name is Joanna Guerra. I am an 8th grader at Hollenbeck Middle School Night. And today I will be presenting my ArcGIS Mapping for Change project. The purpose of this project was to map a problem and use different platforms that we have not used before. Some of us have, so we would just be getting better at our skills. We would also have to work productively to find a solution. This was our research question. What is the distribution of tobacco in California, and how does it affect those who live in the area? Exposure. Have you ever thought about the effects tobacco has on everybody of all ages? Even though you may not smoke, or people you know, like your friends and family, there's still like a liquor store, a supermarket that promotes and sells nicotine or tobacco products. The stores promoting these items have a huge impact on everybody around it. This problem is a huge one. Why? Well, being introduced to these items and seeing them everywhere can lead to one becoming curious about what the product is, what it might taste like, and what it does. This leads to teens or young adults attempting or trying these products, and eventually they might become addicted. This can lead to a higher risk of serious health problems. In this following presentation, we will discuss this matter further and provide evidence to showcase our reasonings. This here is our first map. Cigarette and tobacco wholesalers are the yellow dots, which you might not see because a lot of people don't tend to sell cigarettes a lot. They do sell cigarettes, but not in like a big bunch. Cigarette and tobacco distributors, which is a blue, which is companies or stores that do distribute cigarettes. And the retailers, which are the gray, are the stores and liquor stores that sell cigarettes. As you can see on this map, there is a lot of dots near East Los Angeles, some near schools and even hospitals. These locations enable students, adults, and even the sick living or staying at the hospital easy access to cigarette and tobacco products.
Sí, no sabía si bien llegado a la.
Here is our second map. This represents the lung cancer rates in California.
Está muy bien.
There is a rate of 42.06 cases per 100,000 people.
Okay. Muchas
These
gracias.
people are confirmed to have lung cancer as of 2020. As you can see, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, we've got stats that stated that at least 80% of lung cancer related deaths in California are caused by cigarette smoking. On this map, you can see that California has 42.06 cases per the 100,000 people as stated earlier, which can lead to the rate changing from 41 to 77 to 42.35. Here is our third map. This represents chronic conditions in young adults, or the 18 and older. Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System had a survey that was conducted in 2018. The survey asked questions like, do you smoke? Do you have any chronic conditions? Do you have any chronic conditions because of you smoking? Questions like that, really simple questions. And with the people that answered, it was proven that 36.3% of Californian people suffer from a chronic disease because of smoking. This is about 2,880,000 young adults. Conclusion. Tobacco has been around for centuries and has been used throughout the world. And also, it has killed millions of people. kids and young adults, old people. California is one of the largest states and has one of the largest percentages of tobacco users. To prevent people from dying and smoking these cigarettes, we must work together. Here is a clip of Superman saying, "Never say yes to a cigarette." In this video, the nicotine monster or villain represents stores and places promoting cigarettes. Superman, in this case, are the people who are against these cigarettes and helps tell and get the word out that cigarettes are never to be used. As you can see, the cigarette villain was, like, how do you say it? They were promoting cigarettes to kids. They didn't care if they were kids or not. They were promoting kids. And you can see that the kid was reaching for the cigarette. But Superman got in time with his X-ray vision and saw all the harms that cigarettes could cause. This is a great way to help get the word out to kids, especially because kids like watching animations like this. And this will help to get the word out with kids still like paying attention to the video because it is an entertaining video. Social justice and ethnic disparities. This is a piece of evidence that I received from one of my teachers. This evidence reads that lung cancer cases is 53.5 among Black Americans in California. And nationally, it's 61.1. This is significantly higher than the rate of whites in California, which is 48.3. This basically means that maybe in, say, a Black neighborhood, there are more stores promoting cigarettes compared to a white neighborhood where the cigarettes are being promoted less. This would lead to African Americans having more access to cigarettes. This can also mean that maybe they do have the same amount of stores. But what if the cigarettes are cheaper in African American neighborhoods? This would mean that anybody can buy cigarettes because they're cheap. And whites, it would mean, say, cigarettes were more expensive. That would mean that not a lot of whites would keep buying cigarettes if they were too expensive. This project is going to help me in high school because I would like to learn more about this in high school. I would like to find ways to advocate problems like this and advocate my own ideas for a solution. Maybe starting a club in high school to help solve these problems with other teens who agree with me. With this, there would be more teens helping me and helping the community advocate problems and advocating our own ideas for a solution, which can lead to change. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Feel free to ask me any questions, or feel free to give me any feedback. Thank you.